In 1941, Pahlavi's regime enters power. Under this leadership, there was a huge move to remake Iran in the image of the Western powers. This was done by hyper-rapid industrialization and cultural adoption of Western norms and practices. The state controlled the film industry while Pahlavi ruled. Socially conscious films or other films the state disagreed with were banned. Instead, they welcomed global films and ignored regional film interests. There was a growing fervor from the public opposed to these developments, and at the beginning of the Islamic Revolution, citizens viewed cinema as a symbol of Pahlavi's westernization projects. Many cinemas were targeted and burned to the ground. By the time the Iranian government was installed in 1979, 180 cinemas had been destroyed. Since there was a shortage of cinemas, the capacity for film exhibition was severely limited. At first, the government is harsh with its censorship, allowing barely any films to be screened. In 1982, regulations were created to govern the exhibition of movies and videos, with the Ministry of Culture and Islamic Guidance in charge of enforcement. The ministry then created the Cinema Foundation, which handles import and export of films as well as encouraging local production. With these regulations, films started to make a comeback. In 1983, Iran produced 22 features. In 1986, it increased to 57 productions. While the infrastructure for the film industry is getting more established, exhibition still suffers from the destruction at the start of the revolution. The cinema-to-people ratio in Iran is quite large. In 1993, there was only one for every 209,000 people. In the midst of this struggle to increase the film industry, the Iran-Iraq War raged from 1980 to 1988, leaving Iran's economy ravaged. This left very few finances for funding Iranian films and restoring the deteriorating cinemas. Iran's film industry had to enter the global commercial film market to increase their finances. This meant borrowing money from international powers, accepting more imported films, and using government power to push Iranian films into film festivals abroad.
This history gives context to Iran's situation at the time of filming Deserted Station. Released in 2002, the film follows a couple whose car breaks down while on a religious pilgrimage to Mashhad. The husband finds a nearby village and gains the help of a teacher, Faizola, who happens to know a bit about car repair. He determines that they must head into a larger city to get the necessary parts. The wife is left at the village to fill the duty of teaching the kids in Faizola's absence. The bulk of the film switches between the two men out on the road talking, and the wife in the village getting to know the kids. By the end of the film, the men have learned important lessons from each other, and the wife and children have formed bonds that won't soon be forgotten. Studying the film and its context, we can see that Deserted Station carefully balances a resistance to Hollywood's global influence with the drive to create an inward-looking, socially conscious film unique to Iran.
2001 was a big year for Hollywood. It saw the release of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, and the first installment in the Fast and the Furious franchise. These films were just the beginning of what would become a few of the biggest movie franchises globally. Their presence was hard to ignore, as the imperial power of Hollywood and the US loomed large in the global market. Harry Potter and The Lord of the Rings doubled their box office numbers in the international market. Deserted Station provides a view of the complex location Iran was in. It is a resistance to the aesthetics and tropes of the Hollywood style. While these Hollywood movies were dazzling audiences with special effects, glossy production, and fast-paced editing, Deserted Station excels by keeping these things tight, simple, and understated. No frills.
Iran is in a unique situation as a nation, trying to cultivate its own national cinema. As we can see in Deserted Station, there is a need and a drive to be anti-Hollywood in content and form, and moving forward, a need to establish a cinema that is uniquely Iranian. As Gao says in 2004, the new Iranian cinema finds itself in a somewhat anomalous position previously occupied by the likes of Italian neorealism, the French New Wave, and the new German cinema. That is to say, they came from a deviation from the norm that ended up tied to a national identity. On one hand, this is aspirational. The government wants a film movement attached to the country because it makes their national identity more visible and profitable on the global market. But on the other hand, it can end up limiting. Every film coming out of Iran may be judged against certain unreasonable expectations, or it might reduce the complex experience of Iran to a small, easily digestible stereotype. Iranian cinema is important to their nationality and identity, as it was created with many social, political, and economic factors unique to Iran.
Through the turmoil outlined earlier, the Iranian government recognized the necessity of putting Iranian films in the global consciousness. For example, Deserted Station was submitted to the Montreal World Film Festival in 2002 with help from the government. It earned the award for Best Actress for Leila Hatami's performance as the wife. Leila Hatami's performance was an outstanding display of the pressures women face and the roles their society puts them into.
Women and their roles in Iran have been deeply affected by the changes of the revolution. After the Islamic Revolution, women were required by law to wear hijabs. This came with contestation not only about the veil and if it should be enforced, but over the move towards modernity. According to Nafisi, in his comprehensive book, A Social History of Iranian Cinema, Volume 4, The Globalizing Era, modernity represented a demand of individuality, autonomy, agency, legal equality, self-representation, and access to work and power. This is clearly reflected in Deserted Station. It can be seen in the fact that the wife is never given a name, she is only referred to as the wife. The husband makes remarks that demonstrate how women were viewed in Iran at this time. Near the start of the film, he says, "The best woman is a sleeping one." When he leaves her in the village, he talks to one of the kids, and when she asks about it, he says, "It's just man's talk, she's not involved."
Much of the film oscillates between the wife in the village teaching and the men out on the road. In the shots with the wife, not only is she always under the veil she wears, but the framing of the shots also serve as a filmic architectural veil that enforces her position as closed off and without options or autonomy. Compare this to the shots of the men that have them framed against wide open skies and endless expanses of road. They are always the ones making decisions, and they have the freedom to exert their will on the world. They are in control not only of the wife's experience of the world, but also the viewer's. We never know when the camera will cut back to the men, or when they'll change their minds about what we get to see.
After the revolution, Iranian women in cinema became designated as the agents of that era's moral and political corruption, whose presence in society and on movie screens had to be regulated and curtailed. Women were forced into modesty with the veils and their roles in society, and Deserted Station reflects these gender roles with their use of architecture and characters. The movie also shows the pressure women feel to bear children. In the beginning of the movie, the wife talks to her husband about a neighbor who continuously makes backhanded comments about how they have no children, but it is later known that it isn't for their lack of trying. As we discover, the wife had a stillbirth. But there is still extreme pressure from society and culture. Faizola, as him and Mahmoud are traveling, says to the husband, "Children are a part of life. They complete life and continue it." This view highlights the world veiled women live in. At a few moments, we see veiled women rounded up into army trucks for unspecified crimes. Mahmoud asks Faizola about it, but he seems oblivious. These moments show what the audience has been aware of throughout the whole film, the ever-present reality of male authoritarianism that exists just off camera. The wife reaches a breaking point in this harsh reality while playing hide-and-seek at the deserted train station. She is searching for these hidden children, and it soon turns into, as Russell says, a tearful vision of childless solitude and abandonment. She sees clearly just how limited her options are, but she knows that she has to make the best of what she has. A train passes between the camera and the wife. Opportunities pass, but she knows another train is coming. The girl who has admitted she's terrified of trains turns to the wife and says she's over her fear. The wife recognizes that she still has a capacity to enact change for the better in her limited scope. There is hope in this tale for a women's role not quite so bound.
Through this analysis, we showed that Deserted Station carefully balances a resistance to Hollywood's global influence with a drive to create an inward-looking, socially conscious film unique to Iran. The film shows the contrast of men and women's roles in Iran by switching between storylines, but also using the architecture and landscapes in their frames to get this message across. As we see the wife in closed spaces, the men are free and open. Deserted Station stands as a film that is unique to itself, unfazed by the pressures of Hollywood. It deviates from the norm and creates a film that stands with Iranian cinema and its national identity. There's a rich history of political, social, and economic factors that have led up to the making of Deserted Station, all coming together to help create a simple and elegant story in film.